عذراً بيروت.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nofa, and these are today's top stories. Free Patriotic Movement leader MP Michel Aoun, in a verbal attack against Army Commander Jean Ahwaji, calls for people to stage street protests in retaliation for the extension of top army positions. Central Bank Governor Riyad Salameh says Lebanon is planning to issue a new U.S. dollar-denominated bond this year to raise up to $1.5 billion U.S. dollars, avoiding the government using foreign reserves to repay debt. And Hamas calls for confrontation with Israel after the father of a Palestinian toddler killed when their home was firebombed by Jewish extremists died of his injuries. Free Patriotic Movement leader MP Michel Aoun is launching a verbal attack against Army Commander General Jean Ahwaji, accusing him of serving the interest of politicians instead of those of the nation. Aoun held a meeting following the extension of the term of senior security officials on Thursday. He accused the army of shortcomings in curbing the flow of arms in the northern city of Tripoli and the border town of Adsail, adding that Hezbollah's sacrifices for the country are a result of their shortcomings. Had it not been for Hezbollah, he was quoted saying, Christians would face the same one as those of Nineveh in Iraq. This was, of course, in direct reference to the persecution of minorities at the hand of jihadists. Moreover, he warned Ahwaji against placing the army in a confrontation with people similar to when they last staged protests, saying that he has staged a coup along with others against Lebanon's system. Defense Minister Samir Muqbil extended the terms of the Army Commander, Chief of Staff, and the head of the Higher Defense Council, despite months of objections by the FPM, which rejects the extension of the tenures of high-ranking military and security officials. Lebanon is planning to issue a new U.S. dollar-denominated bond this year to raise up to $1.5 billion U.S. dollars. The central bank governor is saying that he is welcoming a move which would avoid the government using foreign reserves to repay debt. He said he also expected Lebanon to issue a new economic stimulus package worth around $1 billion in 2016. This is the largest ever U.S. dollar-denominated Eurobond, raising $2.2 billion. The central bank is widely seen as one of the most dependable institutions in the Mediterranean country, where political divisions have brought government policymaking virtually to a halt.
They can issue up to $1.5 billion if they want to use all the legal limits they have. No, these are within the already voted laws. The tendency is to have another stimulus package for 2016, and we are in a need to stimulate credit because the growth in credit this year is low. It's growing at a ratio between 3 and 4% on an annualized basis, while in fact the deposits are growing at a rate of 6 to 7% this year. There is excess liquidity, and we need to channel this liquidity into the economy. Lebanon has difficulties to export due to the situation in Syria, and at the same time the conflict in the region, lower oil prices, have created less demand for consumption or investment in the country. As long as the monetary stability is not threatened, the central bank will keep innovating and creating opportunities for credit and investment locally.
The father of a Palestinian toddler was killed when their home was firebombed by Jewish extremists last week. He died of his injuries, bringing a Hamas call for confrontation with Israel. The arson attack in the village of Douma in the occupied West Bank triggered angry Palestinian protests and an international outcry over Israel's failure to curb violence by hardline Jewish settlers. Saad Dawabsha died in hospital in the southern Israeli city of Beersheba, where he was being treated for third-degree burns. Dawabsha's wife, Riham, and 4-year-old son, Ahmad, are still fighting for their lives in another Israeli hospital after the arson attack which killed 18-month-old Ali on Friday of last week. Israeli media reported there have been signs of improvement in Ahmad's condition, although his life remains in danger. The family's small brick and cement home in the occupied West Bank village of Duma was gutted by the fire, and a Jewish Star of David spray painted on a wall along with the words "Revenge" and "Long live the Messiah." Coming up next, elderly survivors in Japan's Nagasaki mark the 70th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news here on Future Television. The head of the International Committee of the Red Cross began a 3-day visit to Yemen in order to assess the dire humanitarian situation in the war-torn country. Peter Maurer flew into the rebel-held capital of Sana'a, where he was welcomed by Houthi rebel officials. Maurer is to hold talks with Houthi leaders and with their allies from the General People's Congress Party of ousted President Ali Abdullah Saleh. The ICRC said in a statement ahead of the visit that his trip would focus on the dire humanitarian situation in Yemen and that he would hold talks with unidentified leading officials. More than 4 months of ferocious fighting in Yemen between the rebels and loyalists of the exiled government have devastated the impoverished country. The loyalists have been backed by airstrikes and an air and sea blockade by a Saudi-led coalition. The decision by one of the top Democrats in the U.S. Senate to oppose the nuclear deal between Iran and world powers was disappointing, but not surprising, White House spokesman Josh Earnest said. President Barack Obama's hopes of preserving the nuclear deal were dealt a blow on Thursday when New York's Chuck Schumer came out against it, even as the White House tried to draw attention to other lawmakers who were indeed backing the agreement.
I think we're up to 12 members of Congress that have come out in support of the deal. And that's 7 in the House and 5 in the United States Senate. So certainly the 2 members that you mentioned are influential members of Congress, but they have 1 vote. And since the speech, we've gotten substantially more votes in support of the deal. And this is a difference of opinion that President Obama and Senator Schumer have had dating all the way back to 2003. That all said, that's why I would describe this as an announcement that was not particularly surprising to anybody here at the White House, even if it was disappointing. But it doesn't change our confidence that we'll be able to mobilize a substantial majority of Democrats in both the House and the Senate in support of the deal and, if necessary, to sustain the president's veto.
Scores of Afghans donated blood under tight security in Kabul to people injured in 2 massive attacks that have killed at least 40 people the previous day. Health ministry officials said the attacks were the biggest of their kind in the Afghan capital in recent years. Friday's attacks in Kabul, one near a government and another near a military complex in a residential area, the other suicide bombing outside a police academy, send the strongest message yet to Afghan President Ashraf Ghani that militants are still able to strike at his heavily fortified seat of power. Elderly survivors in Japan's Nagasaki are getting ready to mark the 70th anniversary of the dropping of an atomic bomb on their city. At 11:02 a.m. on August 9, 1945, 3 days after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, the United States dropped the atomic bomb nicknamed Fat Man. It was dropped on the industrial port city of Nagasaki. The bomb blasted about 300 meters above the ground and totally destroyed an area of about 1.6 kilometers in radius from the hypocenter. More than 150,000 died in the attack and from the subsequent radiation sickness. Japan surrendered 6 days later, ending World War II. Thousands will gather at Nagasaki's Peace Park on Sunday, including U.S. Ambassador Caroline Kennedy, to commemorate one of the most painful days in Japan's history. And speaking of anniversaries, 1 year after a white police officer fatally shot an unarmed black teenager in Ferguson, Missouri, sparking weeks of unrest and demonstrations, the subject of how to improve race relations still reverberates across the U.S. In August 2014, 18-year-old Michael Brown was shot 6 times by Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson after an altercation where, according to police, Brown struggled with Wilson before the fatal shots were fired. But witnesses to the shooting claimed that was not true and that Brown had held up his hands and was surrendering when he was shot multiple times in the head and chest. Brown's family released private autopsy findings in August, saying they did not trust local officials' account of the incident. As the details of the original shooting event emerged from investigators, angry Ferguson residents took to the streets to protest. Peaceful protests quickly turned into looting and violence, causing millions of dollars of property damage, leading police to set curfews and deploy riot squads. Colorado theater shooter James Holmes has been sentenced to life in prison after a jury failed to agree on a death penalty. The jurors returned the sentence on Friday. The same jury had rejected his insanity defense, finding Holmes capable of understanding right from wrong when he murdered 12 people and tried to kill 70 others in 2012. A jury of 9 women and 3 men deliberated for less than 7 hours and decided they could not unanimously sentence the convicted shooter to die by lethal injection. He will be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Free Patriotic Movement leader MP Michel Aoun, a verbal attack against Army Commander Jean Ahwaji, calling for people to stage street protests in retaliation to the extension of top Army positions. The central bank governor, Riyad Salameh, says Lebanon is planning to issue a new U.S. dollar-denominated bond this year to raise up to $1.5 billion to avoid the government using foreign reserves to repay debt. And Hamas calls for a confrontation with Israel after the father of a Palestinian toddler was killed when their home was firebombed by Jewish extremists. He died of his injuries this morning. Those are your Saturday headlines live here on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal, wishing you all a good weekend. Take care.